What's up guys, it's Gino. Welcome back to another Elden Ring video, and today we're going to be talking about why Elden Ring is still one of the best single player games in 2024. Now I know Elden Ring isn't completely single player, and you can use summon signs to get help from friends or from the community to beat bosses, but we're going to go over that fact like if you didn't have any help and it's your first time playing. With the upcoming release of the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC, the first DLC to come to Elden Ring, to be released in June of this year, it feels so right to talk about why Elden Ring is so great. Elden Ring was first released in February of 2022 by From Software and Bandai Namco Entertainment. This is a Souls game that does not follow any timeline from Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 2, or Dark Souls 3. But we do see a repeat character that can be found, and it's patches. Patches you can find in Elden Ring. The game was quickly scooped up by Souls players, selling over 12 million copies in the first month of release, and would be the best-selling game from February to March of 2022, also making it the fastest-selling game from Bandai Namco. Now it's expected to be a fan favorite from the hype built behind it and other Souls games. But players had never seen a game like this, an open world, Souls-like adventure, almost an RPG, with unlimited character customization and 10 base character types, being astrology, hero, samurai, vagabond, bandit, prisoner, warrior, confessor, prophet, and wretch. These characters would allow you to start the game with different items based on the type of playthrough you wanted to do. Elden Ring quickly became a fan favorite, and at the Game Awards of 2022, Elden Ring would be voted as Game of the Year, a huge accomplishment for From Software and Bandai Namco. This would not be a shock to current Elden Ring players, since they knew how fantastic the game was, but this would bring way more players to Elden Ring, and Souls games as a whole. And with that information out of the way, let's talk about why Elden Ring is simply still one of the best single-player games of 2024. Elden Ring has a unique difficulty. With your first playthrough of the game, you may find it extremely frustrating due to the vast amount of enemies throughout the lands between, and difficulty trying to figure out where to go. I've seen many people turn away trying to fight the tree sentinel in Limgrave as soon as you get into the map. Now, what some of these new players don't know is that Elden Ring is open world. You do not need to fight every boss that shows up on your screen. You can simply run past it and return to it later on with better weapons and higher levels. This makes the game easier to progress when you know not every lower tier boss is necessary to get to endgame. The difficulty only gets harder as you progress through the lands between though. With places like Caelid, Liurnia Lakes, Leyndell, and Mountaintops of the Giants, it doesn't get any easier. But with Elden Ring's leveling system, you can level your base attributes up to scale the newly found weapons. Not saying that it will make the game any easier due to the fact that you can be a high level and still struggle with the movement of bosses and enemies around the map. Now let's talk about movement. With movement being one of the most important things in the game, every boss you will find will have a specific moveset that some players master, and figuring out when to roll is huge in Elden Ring. You roll too early, you get smacked. You roll too late, and you get smacked. And to help with that, some players will have a light load to make their character roll quicker and recover from the roll faster. Knowing the right movement to do on any boss can seriously boost your experience throughout the game, since some of the lower tier repeat mini bosses will have the same moveset throughout the whole game. The leveling system in Elden Ring is very similar to previous Souls games. You kill enemies and get runes to level up your character. Some people may find this difficult in endgame. The levels as you progress will cost more and more runes as you go on, making it difficult to be over-leveled going into some of the more challenging bosses, which makes the game experience much better, but also more difficult. Yeah, it may take you a few tries to beat that boss, but by the second or third try, you will have more of an understanding of the boss's moveset and how to counter some of their attacks. Now, what you choose to level up will determine what kind of build you're doing, just like other Souls games. Me personally, I love Dex and Strength builds due to the fact that I like to RNG a lot of the bosses that I come across. It's super easy to find out what levels you need to scale to make your character better by looking at your main weapons and seeing how they scale. You may have the Uchigatana, one of the starting weapons in the Samurai class, and want to bring that endgame. If you hover over that item while upgrading it, at the bottom it will tell you the letter scaling next to the attribute you want to scale, making it easier to figure out where you want to dump your runes into. Leveling is one of the more difficult aspects of the game, but once you get to the right level, most of the bosses and enemies can be inflicted with a lot of damage, making them easier to fight and get more runes. Another unique part of the game are Ashes of War and incantations. You can find incantations and spells by beating some lower tier bosses and completing quest lines from NPCs on the map, which allows you to expand the kind of build you're doing and give you better buffs in-game. Some of my builds solely rely on spells and incantations to buff and kill high-level bosses. This adds so much to the game. Allowing you to save some of your flasks to last longer in battle is very important. This helps with main remembrance bosses a lot of the time. But now let's talk about some of these main remembrance bosses in the game. Elden Ring has many bosses you can fight, 238 to be exact, but many more are to come with this Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. These bosses can range to main remembrance bosses to mini bosses across the entire map and the lands between. And a lot of these bosses are optional, and some you may never come across unless doing specific quest lines from NPCs in the game. The main remembrance bosses are some of the most important though. Beating a remembrance boss will let you gain access to their weapons and sometimes their armor, and it will also progress you further into the game, unlocking new parts of the map that you had no clue existed. The remembrance weapons are usually very strong, and you can level these weapons with somber smithing stones, another very important item in Elden Ring, making remembrance weapons actually useful if you wanted to use them in later game bosses to tear through their health bar. You're not going to find most of these high level remembrance bosses until later in the game when it gets way more difficult. Now the lore in Elden Ring is simply too long to get into this video, but there are some great videos you can find on YouTube that will go way more into detail, and I will link those in the description below. Now, how does all of this make Elden Ring one of the best single player games of 2024? In my opinion, this game, along with all other Souls-like games, has some of the most unique gameplay out there. There is nothing better than starting a fresh build and watching it progress through the whole game. The satisfaction after defeating any boss in a Souls-like game feels like a huge accomplishment. In 2024, I have yet to find a more satisfying sit-down game that you can just explore infinitely and not hit any dead ends. Miyazaki, the president of From Software, has revealed there are still hidden elements of the game that no one has found. The game has been out for 2 years now, and still, there's stuff we haven't found. This just shows you how much there is to do in the lands between and makes it infinitely more enjoyable than some of the other games released in the last year. Elden Ring has quickly climbed to the top of my favorite games list, and with the upcoming release of the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC, it has the whole community along with myself on the edge of their seat to see what masterpiece they give us. And this is why I think Elden Ring is still one of the best games in 2024.